I never thought a simple desk job could feel like walking on a tightrope. But that's exactly what my life became when my boss decided to test my integrity. I worked in a mid-sized company. Not glamorous, not the kind of place people wrote about in magazines, but stable, safe. At least, that's what I told myself every morning when I swiped my badge at the glass doors, the hum of fluorescent lights already buzzing in my head. My role wasn't flashy. I wasn't closing million-dollar deals or pitching to investors. I was the one behind the curtain, building reports, turning raw data into something that made sense for executives. Numbers were my language, and accuracy was my pride. But pride doesn't mean much when your boss is drowning, and you're the lifeline they're desperate to grab. She wasn't new. I'd worked under her for nearly 2 years. At first, I respected her. She had this confident stride, this air that made people step aside in hallways. But the cracks had been showing for a while. Deadlines missed, promises she couldn't keep, overconfidence turning into overcompensation. By the time this story began, she was under pressure from higher-ups to deliver results our department simply didn't have. It started with a look. I'll never forget it. I just finished pulling the raw numbers for a quarterly report when she stopped by my desk, leaning against the cubicle wall with that too-wide smile. It wasn't friendly. It was a kind of smile that felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced in the mirror and was now trying it out on me. "Hey," she said casually, eyes darting to the spreadsheet open on my screen. "Numbers are looking rough this quarter, huh?" I gave a noncommittal shrug. "They're accurate." That was always my line. No matter how bad the data looked, I double-checked, cross-referenced, run formulas twice. Accuracy wasn't negotiable. Her smile tightened. "Of course. But, she tapped her manicured nails against the cubicle wall. Sometimes numbers need adjusting. Presentation matters more than raw data. You get what I mean, right?" There was a long pause where I just stared at her, my throat suddenly dry. Adjusting. That was the word she used. Not fixing. Not lying. Adjusting. It floated in the air like smoke, curling around me, choking me before I could even respond. I wanted to say no immediately, to stand up and declare that integrity was the backbone of my work. But the reality was Messier. She was my boss, the person who signed off on my performance reviews, the gatekeeper promotions, raises, job security. "I'll see what I can do," I murmured, not committing but not outright refusing either. Her smile widened, and for a second, she looked almost relieved, like she'd offloaded a burden onto me. Then she walked away, heels clicking on the tile, leaving me staring at a spreadsheet that suddenly felt heavier than a stack of bricks. The rest of that day was a blur. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, the temptation gnawing at me. What if I did change the numbers? A small tweak here, a slight nudge there. No one would know, no one but me, but I did know. And I couldn't shake the thought that once you cross that line, you can't uncross it. Today it's quarterly sales. Tomorrow it's financial statements. Then it's fraud investigations and lawsuits. By the time I packed up to leave, my chest was tight, like I'd been holding my breath all day. I walked out into the cool evening air, trying to let the city's noise drown out the storm in my head. But the voice followed me. She asked you to lie. She asked you to bury your own integrity for her convenience. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. I thought about my family, about the people who trusted me, about how one bad decision could ripple outward and destroy everything I'd worked for. My job wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. It was steady, and I wasn't going to burn it all down for someone else's mistakes. The next morning, I walked into the office with decision carved into stone. I wasn't going to adjust anything. I was going to do my job right. But if she wanted to play games, I'd make sure every move was documented, every instruction written down, every email saved. She thought she was clever, that she could whisper vague instructions and leave me holding the bag. She had no idea I was already planning for the moment she'd try to turn on me. When I submitted the first report, completely accurate, numbers and all, I CC'd her on the email. My heart hammered as I hit send, like I had just lit a fuse. I knew she'd see it, and I knew she wouldn't be happy. But I also knew that paper trails don't lie. And if she wanted to test how far I'd bend, she was about to learn that I'd rather watch her sink than sacrifice my integrity. That was the beginning. The day I chose quiet defiance over blind obedience. The day I realized revenge doesn't always have to be loud or messy. Sometimes, the sweetest revenge is just doing your job better than the person trying to ruin it. The fallout didn't happen immediately. For a while, it was like waiting for a storm you knew was coming but couldn't quite see on the horizon yet. I'd done my job, turned in the report exactly as the data showed, and copied her on the email like I always did. On the surface, nothing had changed. My co-workers went about their routines. The chatter in the break room stayed the same, and the hum of printers and clattering keyboards filled the office like background noise. But she knew. I saw in the way her eyes narrowed when she passed my desk, in the way her smile grew thinner, tighter, like stretched plastic. She'd asked me to bend, and instead, I stood straight as a board. She didn't call me out right away, though that would have been too obvious. Instead, she tried subtler moves. At the next department meeting, she clicked through slides, her voice smooth and confident as she painted a picture of progress. She promised improvements, growth, results we hadn't actually achieved. I sat there, silent, feeling the heat rise up my neck. Every word she spoke was a balloon she inflated with hot air, and I knew eventually one of them would pop. After the meeting, she lingered behind while everyone else shuffled out. "Hey," she said, her tone light but her eyes sharp. "About that report, you really should have highlighted the positive trends more. It came across a little negative." I forced a polite smile. I presented the numbers accurately. Her jaw tightened just for a second. Then she gave that rehearsed smile again. "Of course, accuracy is important. Just keep in mind that presentation matters too. We don't want to alarm leadership unnecessarily." I nodded, but inside, a cold knot formed in my stomach. She wasn't letting it go. She was planting seeds, setting the stage to make it look like I was the one misinterpreting things. The weeks dragged on, each one heavier than the last. I kept my head down, did my work, and quietly built my shield. Every instruction she gave me, I asked her to put in writing. Every adjustment she hinted at, I followed up with a clarifying email. Just to confirm, are you asking me to? That way, if she ever tried to twist her words, I had the proof. At first, she seemed amused by my sudden formality. Then she grew irritated. Her replies got shorter, sharper. Eventually, she stopped responding in writing altogether, preferring to corner me at my desk or catch me in hallways, speaking in those vague, loaded sentences. But I didn't bite. I'd always follow up with a paper trail. Per our conversation earlier, became my favorite phrase. It was exhausting. Every day felt like walking into a battlefield, except I wasn't allowed to fire first. I had to wait, let her think she had the upper hand, let her dig her own grave. The breaking point came faster than I expected. One Friday afternoon, I got an urgent message from her. "We need that monthly report polished and sent to leadership by end of day. Adjust the revenue numbers to reflect projected growth, not actuals. They're expecting better results." My heart raced as I read the words. This wasn't subtle anymore. She wasn't hinting. She wasn't implying. She was telling me, point blank, to falsify data. I stared at the message, my fingers trembling over the keyboard. This was it. This was the moment she crossed from shady to dangerous. I didn't reply right away. Instead, I took a screenshot. Then I crafted my response carefully. "Just to clarify, are you requesting that I change the revenue numbers from actuals to projected figures? I want to ensure I understand correctly." I hit send and waited. Minutes later, her reply came. "Yes. Make it look better. Don't overthink this." There it was, the nail in her coffin. I copied the data straight, untouched, into the report. I submitted it to leadership, seeing her as usual with a time-stamped trail. My chest pounded as I closed my laptop, adrenaline coursing through me. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't accused her of anything. I'd simply refused to play her game. The next week, the questions started rolling in. Leadership wanted to know why the numbers in my report didn't match the rosy projections she'd been feeding them in meetings. I heard murmurs of confusion in the office, whispers behind closed doors. She started looking more frazzled, her hair less perfectly styled, her smiles more brittle. Then came the day she tried to throw me under the bus. I was called into a meeting with her and two senior managers. She sat at the table, her expression a mask of calm professionalism, though her eyes burned with desperation. There seems to be a discrepancy between the data in your report and the numbers I've been presenting, one of the managers said. Can you explain? Before I could answer, she jumped in. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I asked my analyst here to highlight projected trends, but he must have misinterpreted. I should have been clearer. Her voice was smooth, practiced. She was trying to paint me as incompetent without outright saying it. My palms grew sweaty under the table, but inside, I felt a strange calm settling over me. This was exactly the moment I'd been preparing for. I opened my folder, slid out a stack of printed emails, and placed them neatly on the table. Actually, I said evenly, I have all the correspondence regarding that report. Every instruction was documented. I followed the data as it came, and the emails confirmed that. Her face paled, just slightly, but enough that I caught it. The managers glanced at the papers, their brows furrowing. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. For the first time in weeks, I felt the knot in my stomach loosen. This wasn't just about numbers anymore. This was about integrity. And I was done being her. The silence in that meeting was deafening. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner, the soft tick of a clock on the wall, and the steady thump of my own heartbeat in my ears. My boss sat frozen for a split second, her face betraying the panic she was trying to swallow. The managers leaned forward, scanning the printed emails I'd placed on the table, their eyes darting back and forth like they were connecting puzzle pieces in real time. One of them finally looked up at me. So you're saying these numbers reflect the actual performance of the department? I met his gaze and nodded. Yes, every figure in my report is accurate, pulled directly from the source data. I also want to point out that I confirmed her instructions in writing before proceeding. The other manager flipped through the papers, pausing on the one email where she clearly told me to make it look better. He adjusted his glasses and read it aloud, word for word. The words hung in the air like a confession no one wanted to touch. My boss shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her fingers twisting together. That's not how I meant it, she stammered. I was trying to encourage him to frame things positively, not to falsify data. But her voice had lost its usual confidence. The cracks were showing, and everyone in that room could hear them. I didn't need to add anything more. The evidence spoke louder than I ever could. Still, I let myself lean back slightly in my chair, steadying my breath. For weeks, I'd been walking on eggshells, terrified she'd corner me, terrified she'd spin her narrative before I had the chance to defend myself. And here I was, calm, prepared, armed with the truth while she flailed. The managers exchanged a glance. One of them closed the folder and said in a measured tone, "We'll need to review this further with HR." And just like that, the meeting was over. No dramatic shouting, no slammed doors, just a quiet but undeniable shift of power. When I walked back to my desk, I felt lighter than I had in months. The weight of her manipulations, the endless second-guessing, the paranoia being set up, all of it had started to lift. But I also knew this wasn't the end. She wasn't the kind of person to accept defeat gracefully. Over the next few days, the office felt different. People whispered more. Doors stayed closed longer. My boss, once loud and commanding, moved through the halls like a shadow. She avoided eye contact with me, her voice quieter in meetings, her smile gone. I could sense the walls closing in on her, and honestly, it was satisfying. Then came the email from HR, a formal request for me to attend a meeting and provide all documentation regarding recent reports. My chest tightened as I read it, but it wasn't fear, it was relief. The net was tightening, and I wasn't the one trapped inside it. I walked into the HR office with my folder under my arm, every email and timestamp neatly organized. The HR rep greeted me with a professional smile, her tone polite but serious. "Thank you for coming in. We've been made aware of some inconsistencies, and we'd like your account." I laid out everything. How my boss had hinted at adjusting numbers, how our requests had grown more direct, how I documented every step. I presented the emails, the reports, the confirmations. I didn't embellish, didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. By the time I was done, the HR rep looked both impressed and disturbed. "This is very thorough," she said, tapping a finger on one of the emails. "It's clear you acted appropriately and professionally." Hearing those words felt like a rush of cool air after suffocating for weeks. I'd been second-guessing myself, wondering if I was paranoid, if maybe I'd taken things too seriously. But no, my instincts had been right. Meanwhile, my boss was called into her own meeting with HR. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. The aftermath told me everything. She came out of that office pale and stiff, her usual confident stride replaced with a slow, deliberate walk. She didn't look at anyone, just kept her eyes glued to the floor as she headed straight back to her office and shut the door. The whispers grew louder after that. People noticed a change, even if they didn't know the details. Some speculated she'd messed up a big project. Others thought she clashed with upper management. Only I knew the truth, and I kept it to myself, savoring the quiet justice unfolding around me. A week later, the official announcement came. She had resigned to pursue other opportunities. The wording was polished, the kind of corporate PR spin designed to make it sound like a choice. But everyone knew, you don't go from running meetings and making big promises to disappearing overnight unless something went very, very wrong. When the news hit my inbox, I sat back in my chair and let out a long, slow breath. It was over. The storm had passed, and I was still standing. She tried to make me her scapegoat, but in the end, she'd written her own downfall. And the best part? I never had to raise my voice, never had to play dirty. I just did my job, did it right, and let her lies collapse under their own weight. Still, I couldn't help but wonder, did she ever realize it was her own arrogance that destroyed her? Or did she walk away blaming me, the difficult employee who refused to bend? Either way, I had my peace. Her office was empty by Monday morning. No goodbye party. No farewell emails. Not even a thank you card left behind on her desk. Just a dark, locked door and the faint echo of her absence hanging over the floor. The woman who used to command attention with every click of her heels was gone, erased almost overnight. The official line was that she had resigned, that she wanted to pursue other opportunities, but we all knew better. You could feel it in the air. The way people whisper at the coffee machine, the way their voices dropped whenever her name came up. Some co-workers speculated she'd been forced out for botching a big project. Others thought she'd clashed with executives one too many times. I didn't correct them. I just listened, nodding, letting the myths grow. Only I knew the truth. She hadn't been outsmarted by anyone else. She'd been undone by her own arrogance. I sat at my desk that morning, sipping lukewarm coffee, staring at the blank screen in front of me. I thought about all those nights I'd lain awake, running scenarios in my head, worrying she'd twist her words and make me her scapegoat. And now, she was gone and I was still here, quiet, steady, untarnished. I'd done nothing but my job, and it had been enough to bring her down. The strangest part was how ordinary everything felt. No one congratulated me. No one pulled me aside to say, "Good job," standing up to her. To everyone else, it was just another day at the office. But inside me, something had shifted. I'd stared down manipulation and deceit, and I hadn't caved. I'd proven to myself that integrity wasn't just a word people toss around. It was a shield, one that had protected me when everything else felt like it was crumbling. Later that week, HR called me in one final time. The rep thanked me for my cooperation, told me I'd handled the situation with professionalism, and assured me the company valued my commitment to accuracy. It was the most formal praise I'd ever received, but it meant more than any Employee of the Month certificate. It was validation that I'd done the right thing, even when it felt like the harder path. As I walked out of that office, sunlight streamed through the tall windows, warm on my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt truly light, like I could breathe again. The tension in my chest was gone, replaced with quiet satisfaction that sank deep into my bones. Revenge doesn't always come with fireworks or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it's silent. Sometimes it's as simple as standing your ground while someone else collapses under the weight of their lies. Watching her downfall wasn't about humiliation or spectacle. It was about justice. She tried to drag me into mud with her, and instead, she drowned in it alone. I still wonder, every now and then, what went through her head when HR laid out the emails, the proof, the undeniable trail she left behind. Did she feel betrayed? Did she rage against me in her mind, convinced I'd set her up? Or did she finally realize, even for a fleeting moment, that she'd orchestrated her own demise? I'll never know. And honestly, I don't need to. What I do know is that integrity saved me, patience armed me, and silence became my sharpest weapon. I didn't need to shout or scheme. I just needed to let the truth do what it always does. Rise to the surface, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. So if you've ever been underestimated, cornered, or pressured to betray yourself for someone else's gain, remember this. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply refusing to play their game. Let them trip over their own lies while you stand tall, unshaken. Because when the dust settles, there's no satisfaction quite like knowing you didn't just survive. You won. And if this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell me in the comments, what's the most satisfying moment of justice you've ever witnessed? Don't forget to subscribe because there are plenty more stories where this one came from. And trust me, you won't